Well, good morning and welcome to today's webinar to everybody. This webinar is here to help you ensure flawless QoE through CDN switching. My name is Joaquin de Miguel, Marketing Executive here at NPAW, and over the next 30 minutes, I will host this webinar along with two of good friends. So starting with housekeeping, the slides will be distributed via email afterwards to all of you. Please feel free to send over the questions at any time. I will collect and address them during the Q&A session after the webinar. Please submit them via the questions that tab located on the right-hand side panel on your screen. And I would like to remind you that this webinar will be recorded from beginning to end. A poll will appear during and at the end of the webinar for you to answer, all of us together to be answered by our professionals. So here we have, we're going to introduce both of our presenters, Mark and Julien.
Hi guys, I'm happy to be with you today. I'm Julien, I'm the Managing Director of Leaseweb CDN, and we are here with Mark as well, my good friend from Nice People at Work. We're gonna do this webinar very interactive and in an informal manner. So really, we hope we can have a good Q&A session, and we hope you'll find this webinar very interesting.
Thank you, Julien. As Julien said, I'm Mark Micas, VP of Customer Engineering at Nice People at Work, responsible for any technical questions that our customers have, integrations, and so on. So I will be glad to talk with you about the very interesting topic that we have today regarding CDNs and what are the kind of issues they have and how we can help minimizing those effects in the quality of experience.
All right.
So, yeah, Joaquin, you want to introduce the agenda?
Yes, I'll introduce the agenda. So during this webinar, we'll be talking about the basic concept of CDN. That will be handled by Julien on the Lease website, the limitations associated to using a single CDN, and then we'll go introduce the topic of CDNs within business intelligence with our smart switch from NPAW, and the inherent limitation of using multiple CDNs. And then both of our presenters will discuss as a form of conclusion on what's the best solution for your needs.
Okay, so as Mark Micas, as part of MPAW, I would like to introduce you a little bit about our company and what we do. Basically, MPAW is a global leading big data and business intelligence company that operates the online media business since 2008. We first started having our own CDN and online video platform, but today we changed that scope to the analytics focus, and now we are one of the foremost players on that domain. Our main product, Ubora Infinity, it's our analytics platform that helps top-tier broadcasters, OTTs, telcos, and media companies to make data-driven decisions across all departments inside an organization by using metrics of audience, quality, and engagement from every internet-connected screen.
And of course, let me introduce you to Leaseweb. Leaseweb is a very large hosting company based in Amsterdam. This is where I am today, and we are running data centers all across the world now, with more than 15 data centers in the US, half a dozen in Europe, and a couple in Asia, in Australia, and we are offering infrastructure as a service, such as cloud, colocation, and CDN. And we are really glad to be here today to speak more specifically about the CDN part. Maybe in order to start this webinar and make it very interactive with you, we thought to start with the poll questions to understand a little bit your interest and to have as well a feel of the market trend. So maybe we can start with that, Joaquin, with the first poll questions.
Yes. There you go.
So we thought of a first question, as this webinar is about multiple CDN and the benefit of using multiple CDN. We just were wondering first, are you currently dissatisfied by using a single CDN? And there are three possible answers: yes, no, or you're not even using any CDN at the moment and you're considering it. Just to give you, while you're answering, and we'll give it 10 seconds. You have to know that if you're not using CDN at the moment, you're among the minority, actually. Now it's pretty impressive to see that among the top 100,000 of Alexa ranking websites, about 60% now of all the top websites are using CDN, the top 100,000, so it's pretty large. So the CDN service that has been developed over the last 20 years is actually becoming the norm for all the most popular sites.
Closing the poll in a couple of seconds. Closing poll.
Good. That's good. You're not. So we see that 3/4 of the audience is not satisfied by using a single CDN, and it's interesting because indeed, even though a CDN is by definition about decentralization and removing a single point of failure, actually using a single CDN is perceived as being another single point of failure, because indeed it happens that CDN have lower performance in certain geographies or at certain point in time, and then you need to be able to move to another one. What I propose is that we start maybe with the first part of the presentation, which is just a basic introduction to what CDN is, so that everyone is comfortable with the concept. And then we'll introduce the concept of using multiple CDN. Maybe you can switch back to the PowerPoint, Joaquin. It's okay with you?
It's switched on.
So yeah. So now I'm moving to the next slide. 1 second. Yeah. So as I was saying, Leaseweb is proposing several kind of services, but let's just focus on CDN for now. I don't think the topic today is to speak about colocation or cloud services. If we look at the CDN service, why do we even propose CDN? So the reason why CDN has been so successful over the past years is that we tend to rely normal sites, the sites that have maybe not a lot of audience, they tend to rely on a single server, sometimes even a single instance. And when the end user are trying to connect to the site, then all the end user are actually connecting to the same server, maybe based in Amsterdam or in London or in wherever is hosted the origin server. All the end users are connecting to the same origin server, and during peak times, or depending on how far the end user is from the end user, the connection to the website can be slow. The site can be overloaded, and then everyone actually is dissatisfied. The one running the origin server because there is overload, and the end user because they don't see the application or the data that they want to access. So this is why the concept of CDN has been, a content delivery network has been developed very successfully. And you see that all the end users are connecting to a point of presence where the content is cached, and the most popular content will come from those cache, and the least popular content might indeed be delivered by the origin server, it will fill in the cache, and then the next end users that are in the same region that are connecting to the same cache will get access to this content directly from the closest cache. So you see as well that even the malicious end user that are represented with this in red here, the malicious end user will have to go through those CDN POPs as well, and that's why there are series of cyber security services that have been developed as a complement to CDN or on top of the CDN services in order to protect the origin servers from malicious access. And this has been an additional benefit from CDN services. If you look at this decentralized infrastructure, you now see that there is much less heat going to the origin server, because it's only when the cache is not hosting or storing the content that is making a call to the origin server, or as well, for dynamic content. So for very dynamic content, the content is not cacheable, then some hits are going to the origin server, but it's usually for very small volume of content. So the origin server is, I would say, focusing on very smart content, the dynamic, the very personalized content, and the CDN are able to deliver all the images, large files, games, software download, upgrades to the end user without overloading the origin server. So the benefits are pretty clear for CDN. First, it flattens the world. Everyone is suddenly equal. If you want to access an e-commerce site and you are, in a remote location, you can still access it with the same speed as if you were next to the hosting site of this e-commerce site. And that's a tremendous change in the industry. It means that instead of having to deploy your own server in several data centers, you can consolidate your infrastructure in a single place and rely on CDN in order to provide the same quality of experience to everyone across the globe on any device at any time, even at peak time. Because of the second benefit, the offload. So indeed, even when there is a peak, the load is taken by the CDN nodes, and the CDN nodes are completely taking this load and offloading the origin server that remain with a low load. So you don't have to plan maybe marketing event or a peak time because there is a Black Friday or sales or special event happening. You don't need to plan your origin infrastructure to cope with this load. You rely on the CDN to cope with the load and to deliver your content on behalf of the origin server. The third benefit is the security. So indeed, the CDN acts as a barrier, between the malicious users and the origin servers. And the last one, indeed, it's a cost reduction, because what we see now is it's actually more interesting to rely on CDN. Not only because you can you have a reduction in terms of infrastructure at your origin site, so you can reduce your need in very powerful servers and high bandwidth at the origin, but you have as well a very flexible model. So usually the business model used by CDN is to invoice you only based on the amount of traffic delivered to your end user. So it's highly flexible, and you can, I would say, engage yourself with a minimum commit with your CDN supplier, and all the variation would be built only based on the on the traffic, on the audience, on the variation of the audience of your site. So it's a fully flexible service, which has been very beneficial for the cost reduction project that most of the companies are going through. The difficulty, of course, is that the performance of CDN will be based on the distribution of POPs. So the more POPs you have, the more presence you have, the more end user will be able to connect to a POP that is close by. And there is this balance to find. You want to have POPs in an ideal world, if the POPs were free, you would have POPs everywhere. And this way, you would be covering the planet so that end user would connect to a POP that is just next to their ADSL connection. But in the internet world, and due to the different peering, and I think Mark will come back to this, you need to actually find what are the best locations in the world in order to reach the largest number of end users. And this is what Leaseweb did. So of course, we are very present in the US, in Europe, and in Asia, but we are not present everywhere, like in South America or in Australia yet. We haven't yet a data center there, or in China or in India, and these are the drawback. When indeed you rely on a single CDN, well, what you will find out is that the CDN will have benefits and drawback, and you need to cope with them and ensure yourself that they are in sight with what you expect, or what your audience or where is located your audience. And furthermore, not only the location can be a limitation, but as well the benefit, and each CDN is built differently. So you might think that the CDN is a highly commoditized service and they are all the same, which is true. I mean, most of the CDN services are commoditized, and the pricing are going down, and the service, the most basic service, are the same. But it's important to remember as well that as the CDN and the apps are integrating each other more and more, you need to find a CDN that really fits with your type of content. So for Leaseweb, for example, just to give you a simple example, we based our own CDN on Nginx. So Nginx, and we put a very large POP in a strategical location based on Nginx. So it's best actually to deliver very good throughput for video delivery, large file delivery, for gaming providers, software upgrade. This is really where it's best. And you see, I don't want to bore you with all these features, but you see, for example, there are some specific features for security, the kind of token, how can you protect the access to your video and make sure only legitimate users are seeing the video or accessing your content. And you will discover that other CDN are maybe based on Varnish, other CDN are based on other technologies, and each of them has a different set of APIs in order to configure or create an account, or they have different possibilities. Some are allowing you to use API, some are not allowing you. Some options are active in one CDN and not in others, and this is why unfortunately when you choose a CDN, you have to be conscious of this difference between the one CDN and another. So if you choose a single CDN, you might choose it well, and then it's perfectly appropriate for you. But there is limitation, and I think Mark will be introducing those limitations. Maybe we have another poll as well, another question for you guys. I think Joachim, you preferred that before Mark starts.
We're launching this one. There we go. Poll launched.
And indeed, so do you consider you have enough data on your customer experience? Indeed, this is usually the problem. Sometimes you choose a CDN, but you don't really know if you choose the right one, if the impact on the user experience is really best, and that's why is so strong, and so it makes so much sense, because you want to be as Leaseweb, you want to be very transparent about the service you provide and ensure that the customer is able to verify that the service he's expecting from his CDN is actually delivered by Leaseweb.
And actually, let me add here that you control, or you can control with the CDN, you can control up to a certain point, but before the content that leaves the CDN edge servers gets to the final customer, there are some other aspects there that could affect the user experience, as we will discuss in a moment. So having full control of your data and on the customer experience is key to your business as well. Well, and as I can see here, okay, so there's many people that says that they don't have enough data on the customer experience. Maybe we can discuss this at the end of the session with the questions and answers. Okay, and go into a little bit more detail. All right, so I think that I have now full control of the presentation. Okay, so yes, I do. So, okay, thank you very much, Julian, for your introduction on how the CDN works and their benefits. I believe that this is crucial to understand what I'm going to talk in a minute. So, but we warn, I mean, even if a CDN is perfectly configured, and we know that we have the best configuration ever, it's never perfect 100% of the time. So this means that while one CDN is working well under specific conditions of an ISP or a player, maybe another one is working better, or you are having problems with one situation and there is another CDN that it's not having problems at all. So this is why I'm going to propose you or try to defend that having a multi-CDN strategy is really useful for video services where the content must be always available, and also you shouldn't be seeing complaints of end users populating social networks that saying that I cannot see the content or this is not a good service, a good video service. So in the following slides, what I tried to compile was a little bit about discussing about the different challenges that the CDNs must overcome in order that they can provide the best quality of experience. And maybe, well, I would say that the most important issues that CDNs have to overcome are usually peering issues. CDNs and ISPs usually negotiate peering contracts where the CDN allows the ISP to deliver traffic through their own infrastructure if the ISP does the same in exchange. So they allow ISP traffic to go through the CDN. So that's a little bit the magic of the internet. So we are all connected and we have different paths that people can reuse. But when any of my customers usually ask me why at some point, some specific times there are higher peaks of buffer, after a quick analysis, the most common issue that we can find is that the problem is mainly based on the interconnection peering points between the CDN and the ISP. I don't know if any of you have suffered this, but with our analytics platform, it's not uncommon to see a high peak of buffer starting, for example, at 10 p.m. on a Friday night and ending exactly at 12 a.m. at the same night. And when I say exactly, I mean exactly. So at 10:00 and ends at 12:00. So in this case, you're having issues just when the prime time starts and when you have the highest concurrence. So this is something that you cannot afford to have. So this is due to the fact that since part of the CDN traffic has to go through the ISP network, as we have explained, to reach the end user, if the ISP requires additional bandwidth for their own services, they can just squeeze the allowed bandwidth from that specific CDN, causing those huge issues on the end user experience. This action isn't usually fair, so it's not a fair solution that the ISPs take. But sometimes this action can be taken because of contractual things that are apart from what the end user would expect. So this is not something that's the end user's fault, but they are suffering from that. So it's part of the CDN responsibility, provider responsibilities, to be as much closer to the ISP as possible. But if something fails, as we have seen many times, solving this kind of issues is usually out of the customer control, and sometimes even out of the CDN control until the business stakeholders can discuss those contractual terms sometimes. So having the option to be switching to another CDN is usually the fastest solution. The second thing, or the second issue that CDNs have to solve, or are important for CDNs to take care of, is the CDN's access to the content origin. As we could see in the diagrams that Julian explained before, the CDN has to hash the content in the middle and edge nodes before sending it to the end user. If the path chosen to reach the content has many hops, or there's a communication problem between the CDN and the origin, or the origin doesn't have enough bandwidth to deliver the content because the strategy that they have chosen is have all the content inside of the origin. And so, as Julian was explaining, they cannot the most viewed content is not cached in the platform, then this can cause a CDN cold hit. So this increases the amount of play failures if the player times out, for example, or the join time, or what we call the startup time, or the time it takes for the player to start watching the content. So this is usually seen as in our analytics platform as an issue that occurs to all ISPs for a specific CDN, as we allow to filter the data in real time and filter by CDN and ISP. We see that the CDN is failing for all the requests throughout all the ISPs. So the same as before, different CDNs perform different strategies and configurations to get the content from the origin. So while one CDN has issues to get it, maybe another one doesn't have those issues. However, one word of advice here, another one, because the architecture you define when building your CDN strategy is also important. For example, if you have a single CDN accessing the content and then another CDN accessing the first CDN's storage or through it, the bottleneck will be the first one. So if the first one fails, everything fails, even if you have the two CDNs. So I recommend that the best option here would be have both CDNs accessing the origin independently from each other, additionally using the CDN's cloud storage for this purpose, at least for the most accessed videos. And this can help reduce this problem to access to the origin, but this can increase a little bit the costs that you have with the CDN. So there is like a compromise here that we have to take into account. Okay, and finally, the third important issue is network congestion. Actually, CDNs were built to solve this problem, but we sometimes find that some CDN nodes are kind of congested. Actually, CDNs have internal mechanisms that allow to route the requests to nodes that are not that populated. But if something fails, again, having another CDN or having the ability to see what's the most congested node, which Yubora has, we have the possibility to ask the CDN what's the node that's delivering the content, filter by that node, and then understand where is the bottleneck, or where is the platform, the CDN platform having issues. This allows us to tell our CDN, or to tell the CDN provider that there's a node that's being very congested, that's causing most of the buffering issues, and then remove it from the network. But CDNs usually have very good mechanisms. So this is why I left this for the end, because usually all the main problems that we can see are mainly related to pitting and to access to the origin. So we're going to discuss right now the benefits of using business intelligence. So the CDN switching algorithms that I'm going to discuss right now are mainly relying on business intelligence data. Okay, so until now, what we have seen those challenges, and now I will explain, or I like to explain, how a multi-CDN strategy can help you minimize those issues. So CDN visualization. Actually, what you can see here is a screenshot of our interface, Yubora Infinity. I don't know if you can see that properly, but if you are interested, we have plenty of videos and demos that we can share with you if you wanted. Actually, this dashboard here represents the operations dashboard. It's a dashboard that you can build on your own, because what we believe in is that we want to allow our customers to create their own data experiences and mix different data from different natures. So, for example, here, this dashboard has been created for the main purpose, or the sole purpose, of being able to track the play failures, the in-stream failures, buffer ratios, etc. So you can have full control of what's happening in terms of quality of experience. But we have other customers that use it for marketing purposes. Since you can send us the user's age or the user's gender, you can filter that in real time as well, and multi-filter it with different dimensions. So this allows you to be able to get the user X-rays. So you can get you can understand who your audience is and what's the experience they're getting, what are the devices that they're mostly using. So having this possibility to watch, to see all the information is key to a video business. And many of the benefits, I have already been saying it throughout the presentation, but the following ones I would like to extend a little bit further. So identifying user consumption and predicting the traffic. So we want to understand who are the users that are coming to the service, which are their consumption patterns, from which ISPs, devices, as I said before. Knowing your end users leads you to take preventive measurements when related to quality of experience. For example, allowing you to be able to predict the traffic in order to understand if you need extra CDN resources or need to balance the traffic between your main and secondary CDNs, for example. That's a use case that we can have. Filter by CDN. So most of the BI tools in the market allow you to be able to filter your data based on the CDN. Okay, so this helps you to understand how well one CDN performs against the other. But as we have seen before, not only the CDN is important, but also how the CDN is behaving compared with ISPs for pitting issues. Eubora Infinity allows you to filter as many dimensions as you want without any kind of limitation. Real-time information is also interesting because if we take a look at what happened when the issue already occurred, that doesn't help us at all. We want to know that we are having a problem and try to minimize the effects so there are no other end users that are being affected by it. And ensuring high quality of experience and improve the customer satisfaction. These last two objectives are tied together because, of course, if you can ensure a high quality of experience as much as possible, that improves customer satisfaction and you can reduce the churn while increasing the number of new users that will return to your service every month. So, setting the best CDN for every stream in real time is a real challenge, okay? So for this, Eubora, in nice tool of work, inside of Eubora, we have created a module that we call the MySwitch that allows you to do real-time CDN switching based on the data that we get from the analytics. So remember all those metrics that we got in the CDN visualization screen? This data is actually retrieved by the system and makes and we make decisions on calculating what's the best CDN for your purposes. So how MySwitch works, this is what you can see in the diagram here, is mainly based on an API. Okay, so each end user will perform through the video application a request to the API, and that API will respond with a list of the best CDNs for that specific scenario. As you can see, if you can see my cursor, as you can see here. Then the application will select the best CDN from the list and will start streaming that content. So during the playback session, the application is free to keep requesting updates on the CDN status in order to know if they need to keep the current CDN or they need to do a midstream switching. So everything's API based, as I said, but the application can control this. So how is the best CDN detected? Because that's actually one of the main questions that I'm getting from customers. So in this diagram here, we can see the path that a request follows before returning a list of valid CDNs here. So first, the request has to go to security rules block. For example, if you want to block specific countries to access a configuration or tokenize a request that we're doing to the MySwitch, this is the block that will take care of this. Secondly, each configured CDN has a set of network rules based on geolocation, ISPs, protocols, or devices. So if there's a rule that's not met, the CDN is discarded from the final result. And finally, there's a set of overflow rules. So if we have 3 eligible CDNs, imagine that we haven't discarded any CDN in this first block here or in the second block here. For example, there's only one that can accept a specific amount of concurrent users or a peak of bandwidth due to the contract terms, then it gets discarded and goes to the next one. So we have 3 different CDNs, and then we have, for example, Akamai that, or Leaseweb in this case, that can only have around 2,000 concurrents, for example, because that's the contract that I have with Leaseweb. I have a minimum bandwidth, for example, or a minimum traffic that I need to meet, and I want to switch to the other one. That's something that you can do here. So once the request has passed these 3 lines of defense, then we apply the switching mode. And there are 3 different methods. So we have here the balance one, that it's sharing the percentage between one CDN or the other. So we can say 40% of the traffic will go to one CDN, 60% will go to another one in a deterministically way. So we don't use the quality metrics here. Then we have the prioritize that only makes use of the overflow rules. So I have sorted those CDNs 1, 2, 3, and as soon as I discard one, I go to the next one. And the optimize is the one that uses the quality of experience data to calculate the best CDN. So for the last one, which is the one that mostly all our customers are concerned of, and the one that it usually gives the best quality of experience because you are taking into account that information, the best CDN is calculated using a real-time scoring matrix that uses the end-user IP for geolocation, the end-user ISP, and the device to see what's the best CDN or the CDN that's delivering the best quality for all these parameters. So do you remember when I said that real time was important? This is why. Because then the algorithm analyzes metrics such as the current buffer ratio, the current join time, the current bit rate, play failures, with the specifics rules that we have set for each account, and then we calculate the CDN scoring. So, and then, as I said, since we are using an API-based solution, the response is a JSON that sends you the list of CDNs sorted by what's the most important one, or the one that has the best scoring. Finally, to make a little bit of a short briefing on what we have seen, the key points, things that I believe that are important to remember from this webinar. Always choose a CDN that can provide you with the best quality network and points of presence, as Julian was saying. The presence of the CDN is a lot of very, very important. It's key. But as I said, take into account that this doesn't cover the 100% availability. So it's better to use a second option to balance the traffic to ensure a proper quality of experience when an issue arises. Even if you are trying to launch a service in places where your current CDN doesn't have a specific nodes or points of presence, sometimes, or what our customers use, our MySwitch product is also to get local CDNs delivering all the content inside of a region, for example, Brazil. And then for around the world, they use another CDN. So they apply these rules that we have seen before to balance the traffic depending on where the end user is coming from. So as I said, this is also important to allocate your CDNs correctly. Okay, that's the second point here. Moreover, as we have seen, using those CDN techniques, we can ensure minimizing the issues and prevent some other users to start having buffering issues when they are playing the content, and also reduce the time it takes the player to load. And finally, premium business intelligence and analytics tools will provide you with the visibility of what is occurring in your service. So flexibility on which solutions to apply and agility to apply those solutions to manage and get the best performance of all your CDNs that you have contracted. And now I'm going to pass the token to my friend Julian.
Yes. Or we can do this one together, Mark. I mean, I think it's very interesting to understand indeed the benefit of using multiple CDN, and we understand that as well at Leaseweb. You know, I mean, to take an image, we are as well, you know, a cloud provider, and let me go to show the next slide. Maybe I think you still have the end to show the next slide, but. As a cloud provider, we are providing open source cloud services with a cloud stack, but we are as well providing Azure, we are as well providing VMware, and the idea is to help our customers to, you know, not to get captive. What's the worst thing that could happen to you is that you become captive of a single supplier. And at Leaseweb, our mantra is to help our customers, you know, not to get captive. Don't get captive. And we want as well to be. So that's why, you know, being able to provide with nice people at work, quality of experience metrics is extremely interesting for our customers. And as well, we are as well, you know, working on providing not only our own CDN service, but as well a multi-CDN service, so that you get the best service and you get an excellent CDN service and a CDN expertise that has been acquired by Leaseweb, but without using only Leaseweb CDN. We are very agnostic in our approach. You know, we don't want to promote only our platform, but we want to promote our expertise. And I think that's really a trend that is shaping the future here at Leaseweb. And if you look at the, you know, just to keep in mind, you know, whether or not you should use a multiple CDN solution, you should keep this element in mind. So indeed, as Mark explained, you will get better performance as you will access, for example, a specific local CDN in Brazil to deliver your content to the Brazilian audience. you get higher reliability and availability, you know, because of course there is redundancy. So if one CDN is failing in one geography, then thanks to the API of Nice People at Work, you will be redirecting your end user to a best performing CDN. You as well can, you know, of course, leverage the strength of different CDN, and you as well have more capacity. So if you have a peak, you know, sometimes a sudden peak can indeed create a bottleneck in the, you know, with the CDN peering agreement that each has. And being able to move the traffic quickly from one CDN to another will give you more capacity. And even though CDN are made to handle high peak, well, you know, using multiple CDN, you will be able to handle even higher peak. And the last one is actually, you are not locked in.
Yeah, so that's what Julian was saying. Understand the MySwitch as a way to increase the available bandwidth that you have. As you will not only be adding the two capacities that you have available together, but also distribute the end users depending on which is the best option. As I said, conditions in the internet change and everyone is competing for resources in the internet, not only in real life, not only when at work or at life, but also in the technological aspects. So that's important to take into account.
But on the drawback side, you need to be aware that, you know, it's not a silver bullet that will solve all your problem right away. You know, there are some drawbacks that are, you know, you might be able to accept them or live with them, or you might not, depending on your content. So typically, you are limited to the lowest common denominator features only. So of course, you can, you know, any specific feature, you have this bottleneck. You know, you can use whatever is available in all the CDNs. If you have an issue suddenly on one, you know, one customer is complaining about, you know, the delivery of one content, or, you know, you have an issue, it's not the right content being delivered, you have to deal with more parties. You have to deal with, you know, the different suppliers and the switching suppliers. You have to replicate the configuration across multiple CDN. So today, the current multi-CDN provider are usually making the configuration on your behalf. So it's nice if you're not, you know, if you don't need to do the configuration yourself, or if you don't need any, you know, very high reactivity or direct access to your configuration. It's nice that you can rely on a person that will do the configuration for you, but it has its drawbacks. You know, there's no more, you know, this self-service portal you might be used to in order to configure your CDN. Today, only a limited number of actors are providing a self-service multi-CDN you know, portal, and we hope we'll be able to provide that in the near future. And as well, some features that are very important, especially for the, you know, security aspect of the delivery and protecting your content, might not be available, especially the, you know, typically the token authentication, as each CDN is generating its own token using a different method. You cannot actually use multiple CDN if they generate the token distinctly, because the token will not be identified by another CDN if you're changing CDN in the middle. You know, distributing certificate as well. You would have to distribute the certificate on several CDN, have several certificates. That might create a hassle as well. And indeed, the last one is on the cost. You know, I mean, let me show you, just for your information, the cost of a single CDN. So you see the higher the volume, the lower the unit cost. So here you see typically the, you know, Leaseweb pricing as an example, but what you see, you are sending traffic. So if you split the traffic between several CDNs, then each of them is going to get a lower volume, and then the unit price is going to be higher. So you have as well to accept that, okay, I'm getting better performance, higher reliability, higher capacity, but then at the same time, I have to be aware that, okay, well, maybe my cost is not going to be as attractive as I was getting with my single CDN solution so far. So there is really a trade-off here.
Yeah, as Julian was saying, and as I said before, going to highest excellence doesn't. I mean, you need to have different options, so it can lead to extra costs. And not only this, because going to the best CDN in the market, if there is a CDN that says that they are the best CDN in the market, they're lying, because in this case, as I said, they can be the best at some specific points of time with some specific regions, with some specific users. So having a strategy to give like TB-like experiences in the market, it's something that has its cost, and you have to rely on those different providers. But as Julian said, if you increase or you share the cake between different CDNs, the costs will be a little bit higher. So if I was using one CDN and I was using 1 petabyte of traffic, and I want now to have 500 and 500, then the price is going to be a little bit higher. But on the other part, using a CDN switching technique will allow you to have the best experience for your end users.
Perfect. Well, we're arriving here at the end of the webinar. Just one last slide to engage you to try it. It's free, so really feel free to request your trial, either via this communication. We'll send you as well all the slides and all the communication. But maybe we can open for questions.
Yes.
Joaquin, some questions already?
Yeah, we're sorry, we kind of went a bit overboard with the time, so we're going to jump straight to the questions. We have a couple of questions here. First, the first one that says, for redundancy, from Damian McNamara, does the switcher plugin also try different master manifests, or is the CDN domain prefix just been manipulated in a single master manifest?
Okay, that's actually a good question. If I understood correctly, Damien, the thing is, our CDN switching module, what it does is you have to set a specific host name and the specific file name. And what we do is we provide you with the final URL by changing the different host names. So if you have a different manifest, or you have backup manifest and so on, this is something that you can set up in the tool. If that seems a little bit complicated for you, and you say, oh, but it's I have a very complicated management system, and what I want to do is just know which is the best CDN. Don't give me back the URL, give me the CDN, and I will just handle all the URL building myself. This is something that you can do as well. So just ask what's the best CDN for that specific user, ISP, device and IP, and then we give you back the answers. Like the best CDN is in this case Leaseweb, so go for Leaseweb.
All right. So here we have another question. Is Leaseweb actually using a multi-CDN solution to deliver their service? Could you answer that, Julian?
Yeah, of course. So we have currently we are using a single CDN, the one we built, and I showed you the map of all our POPs across the planet. And we are not using a multi-CDN solution when we sell the single CDN of Leaseweb, but we are going to launch a multi-CDN service, and then we're going to call it transparently. You know, we are, as I said, you know, transparency is a very important value that we share here at Leaseweb, and that's why, you know, nice people at work being able to share the experience is something important. So we are going to launch a multi-CDN service. So this one, the current one that is sold is a single CDN, and then when we'll sell a multi-CDN, we'll say it, and we'll open that to the world in a transparent manner, the fact that we'll be promoting a multi-CDN service. But indeed, for this one, it's a single, but then the next and upgrade, as you know, we'll propose a multi-CDN service, and customer will have the possibility to choose whether he wants to use only one or several, depending on the context, as I explained earlier.
All right. We have two last questions to finish the webinar. One of the questions is, I have many apps to integrate. Does this mean that I have to develop code to integrate the plugin in every single app? I
think that this looks to be related to to me, no? So
Yes, indeed.
yeah. So well, that's actually quite a good question. Can be solved pretty easily. So first things first. What I explain is that we are relying on plugins for analytics, while we are relying on API for MySwitch. So the plugin doesn't do any kind of management. It's the customer that sets the rules, the programmatic rules in the application. So this means that you can fire all the events on the server side too. So if we're talking about an API, you don't need to do any changes in the applications. You can just get that API request, and you have a middleware that you use in order to, for example, understand what's the role of the user and which URLs I can give. For example, a pretty simple use case. Is this user paying for HD or not? So you have a user requesting a content URL, and you want to provide the HD manifest or not. So if in this process, before sending back the URL, you just send from the application, you send the IP, and then you send that information to the MySwitch, then we have located the user, we know who it is, and then we can give you what's the best CDN. Then you get the response, and then you finally do all your calculations, token calculations, and so on, and provide the final URL to users. So there is no need to change all the apps or the complex things. You just need to do it once in the server side, and then have your own internal application API getting those results from that middleware, or have your application just requesting the URL, and that middleware will just get the best URL and send it back to the application.
All right, and the last question is, what are the advantages of integrating a smart switch solution API based instead of a DNS redirection or an integration inside of the plugin? This is for Mark as well.
Yeah, that could be a pretty extensive question. Okay, so I believe that there was, I think that there was an article in Streaming Media, which was actually discussing the pros and cons of this solution, of these different solutions. So as the question says, there are 3 different ways that you can do CDN switching. One is based on DNS routing, which just works at the DNS level, as the name implies. So you just make a request to the DNS provider, MySwitch provider, and then they just give you back or redirect you to the specific CDN. The disadvantage here compared to API based is that you are relying on a black box solution that usually you don't know where you are redirecting to before you do. So with the API based solution, you can select which is the CDN you want to switch before doing that. With the DNS based solution, you just rely on that provider for everything. And also sometimes it can conflict with your business rules. Okay, with the business rules that you have, like as I was explaining before, the overflow rules, network rules, etc. This is something that can happen. On the other hand, we also have CDN switching based on plugins. So usually the same plugin that was used for analytics, it's also the same plugin that does the switching. In this case, doing that calculation inside the application, as you can do with the API-based solution, can have, for example, implications on the device CPU, the device RAM. So this can affect sometimes the end user experience. So this usually happens for very low profile devices. But with the API, what you're getting is full flexibility. I mean, you can either do the same as you are doing with or you can do with the CDN switching based plugins on plugins, or you can define your own rules, because in that case you're also relying on the plugin configuration. You're relying on the plugin information. So imagine that, for example, the plugin just the plugin in this case just decides that you have to switch to another CDN that, for example, at that time is failing. It's giving you back a play failure. So how do you control that and reswitch again to another one? So that's the thing that you can keep track of when using an API-based solution, because you get the full list of results, you can get the sorted list of results, and then you can try the first one or try the second one, or even use the analytics API that we, for example, provide to understand if that CDN is starting to have play failures right now, for example, even though the CDN switching algorithm will handle all this complexity for you. But imagine that you want to have a very specific or very detailed switching mechanism because you are an expert on the field, and then you say, I know when I need to switch. I don't need a third-party solution to do that, but I do need information to understand what's the best CDN that we use. And actually, this was the CDN switching based on plugins was the first mock-up or the first solution that we thought on adding into the product, but before starting to develop it, we discarded it because of these limitations. We wanted to provide the full flexibility to our customers and provide example codes for some specific algorithms that they could use if they didn't have an idea on what they wanted to do or how they wanted to do it.
All right, so that is it for today's webinar. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Julien. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
And we will finish the webinar here. This recording will be sent to you tomorrow by email. And thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you very much for coming. Bye.
Yes, guys.